Hello and welcome back to Harry Shoots People. Today is quite a momentous day in my photography journey as we finally hit 100 rolls. Now it's certainly taken a long time and it's been a lot of lessons learned and a lot of money spent, but we're here now. And I thought, what better way to celebrate this than making a retrospective video and going back and looking at the 100 rolls that I've shot, seeing the mistakes I've made, the lessons I learned, and just how my photography's improved along the way. So for the next hour or so, sit back and relax, maybe grab a drink, as we cast our minds back to 4 years ago, to the summer before uni, when my sister bought me my first ever disposable camera, which kicked this whole thing off. So my first ever experience in shooting film came, like most people's did, with one of these little disposable cameras. Like I said before, my sister bought me it the summer before I went to uni, and it just captured some really special times. There was a trip to Scotland with my family, a trip to the Lake District with my friends, and starting uni, and also just those random moments in between. These photos have a lot of that like nostalgic feel to them that you get with a lot of disposable cameras. Obviously, like the quality's not great, and some of the compositions straight up just suck, but I look back on them very fondly because I had so much fun taking them, and that's what it's all about. I like that there's a nice mix of both people and landscapes on this camera, because I still like to do a kind of mix of both nowadays, as I feel like whenever I get a roll back from the lab and it's all one or all the other, I feel like it comes across as quite uninteresting to me. So it's nice, and also I wasn't shooting as much there because it was my first ever roll, so it spanned a load of time and I was really happy to get these results back. And the first roll was a great start, so I knew I had to go out and buy another. My second camera ended up being exactly the same as the first one, as I was a bit scared to try something new, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The second roll ended up coming up very similar to the first one. It was mostly just pictures of me and my flatmates at the very start of uni. They still have that nostalgic feel to them, and I think my favourite thing about disposables is that people like having their pictures taken with them, and people like taking pictures of you with them. The one gripe I did have with this roll was that it felt like I'd shot it too fast. A lot of the pictures were taken on like one night or 1 or 2 nights, and it didn't have that same like memories of summer feeling that I had achieved with the first roll. So I knew that going on from then, I did want to slow down a bit and capture like a length of time. But that was also because I was just excited to take pictures, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. After successfully shooting 2 rolls of disposables, I decided it was time to upgrade. So I went on Depop, bought a little point and shoot, and loaded in some Ultramax 400. So let's see how my first ever point and shoot roll came out. Yeah, so unfortunately, like every film photographer ever, I didn't really understand the severity of opening the back of the camera whilst the film was still loaded in it. And this, as you might be able to tell, led to me burning pretty much every single one of these photos. There are little slivers of these photos that survived. It's like half of a friend's face with a family photo with orange cast and then double exposed to boot. But I think I really learnt my lesson here. Definitely not my best roll. I would say it's definitely top 3 worst so far, but somehow also top 3 best technically. But I was just excited to be using a point and shoot, and pretty naively felt like more of a photographer. Anyway, after this roll, I took a step back and decided to shoot another disposable camera to sort of get my confidence back up again. So we'll see how that went. So roll number 4 with the box outside camera. So definitely not my most reassuring result, that's for sure. Still, even to this day, I'm not really sure what went wrong with this roll. Maybe it was just all underexposed, maybe the flash didn't fire, maybe since it was outdoor, it was 100 speed and just something went wrong along the way. Maybe it was me, who knows? There are a handful of lights present in the photos that I can just about make out, but to be honest, that's the extent of it, that's all I could get out of this roll. So after 2 bad rolls, I knew the next one had to be good to keep me interested. So I loaded some film back into my point and shoot, and this time, when the back was closed, it stayed closed. And it worked. The film came out properly, the camera worked, and I had successfully shot my first roll in a point and shoot. I ended up preferring the landscapes from this roll. It was my first time using autofocus, so I was just getting used to it, and it was a bit difficult moving from fixed focus disposables. I do, however, really like this photo of Jack in the snow. I think it might be my favourite from this roll. Unfortunately, the end of the roll did get a little bit exposed to sunlight, but like I say, it was only a couple rolls compared to the last entire roll. But I thought they ended up coming out quite cool, as it only sort of created this cast on some of the image, and I don't even mind this one of the caravan. I remember as well being a lot more conscious of my compositions, as using the point and shoot felt like a massive step up, and it was. It was a massive step up from using a disposable, and it felt like the images had a lot more to them and I should give them a greater respect when I was taking them. As you get that kind of step up in creative control going from a disposable to a point and shoot, I became a lot more aware of how my images would look, and I wanted to be a lot more proud of them. So I ended up taking a bit more time to compose my images and make sure it was something worthy of shooting it. And another benefit of stepping up from a disposable to a point and shoot was a greatly increased image quality, and I definitely noticed this. I also realised I haven't actually said what my point and shoot is. So it's this little Minolta Riva 35 AF that I got off Depop for about £30. It's pretty basic in terms of features. It has the eponymous autofocus and autoflash. Essentially, it's fully automatic. All you have to do is put the film in properly and shoot. At first, it feels really daunting putting your own film in, as there's so many little rules that you have to remember, but once you get the hang of it and you start getting these scans back, it makes it all worth it. So to prove it wasn't a fluke and I can shoot a roll of film, I decided to load another. I genuinely love this roll, and I'm still impressed with a lot of these photos to this day, especially since it was only about 4 months into shooting film at this point. There's a really nice mix of different kind of photos, and some of these I'd still consider some of my favourite photos to this day. I really like the atmosphere in this photo, these wind turbines, and it's shot through a train window which gives it this muddy look. I really love the way that the wind turbines just fade away into the background. Speaking of wind turbines, when I went back to visit Hull, me and Charlie visited a park and I took this picture of one, which I love. It's very clear and the colours just came out really nice. And then I asked Charlie to take a picture of him, which at the time I did really like, but looking back I would have composed it differently if I'd taken it now. But it was pretty bold of me at the time to ask to take a picture of someone else, and that felt like a big move. So I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad Charlie took part. After shooting the triple pack of Ultramax 400, I decided it was time to try something new, so I ended up going with Fujifilm's Superior Extra 400. This roll ended up serving as another snapshot of fun times with friends and cool scenes I happened across it. I also tried to recreate that windmill picture whilst on a train, but I caught my reflection in the train window and it kind of ruins it. I enjoyed shooting this roll, and whilst they aren't the best pictures in the world, I was still happy to take them. It is quite interesting to see what classified as worthy of taking a picture back then, as nowadays I wouldn't have taken this shot, but I did back then and I'm happy that I did it. I'm also pretty glad that my first try at trying a new film stock went well, as it's something I still love to do to this day, is to experiment with different film stocks and sort of just branch out into what's available. But seemingly that was enough experimentation for now, as the next roll I loaded was more Kodak Ultramax. And this roll contains one of my favourite pictures that I think I've ever taken. I was just walking home from work at the time and I stopped across this gas station, which looked pretty cool, so I took this. I'm not exactly sure what it is about this photo that makes me like it so much. It's by no means a perfect image. There's spots of underexposure in the shadows and scratches and dust on the picture, but I love the atmosphere that's created here. I love the clouds that are above that look gloomy with a slight pinkish hue. I like the fact that all the lights in the petrol station are blown out and it gives it this sort of like dream-like ambience. I know it's a bit cliche and very day one film photography to take pictures of petrol stations, but cliches are useful for beginners and it gives you a nice way to compare yourself to your idols, because obviously a lot of people in the scene take these kind of pictures, so it gives you a nice point of comparison. I shot most of this roll at a festival, and whilst I do like some of the pictures, it is just the same picture multiple times. Like, these are apparently 4 different pictures. Nice ways to film, Harry. This picture is probably the best from the day. I love the shadows around the edge that sort of lead your eye in with the guiding light in the middle. I mean, apart from this person's phone and this ice cream truck, but it was a nice lesson in composition. At this point, I was watching a lot of film photography YouTube, and I decided, since I made the big perilous jump from disposables to point and shoots, I was now somehow ready to jump from a point and shoot to an SLR. So I ordered myself a Praktica MTL5 and loaded it with, you'll never guess, Kodak Ultramax 400 and started shooting. And safe to say, I struggled a lot this time. Maybe I wasn't ready to be doing manual focus. When I had a little more time to make sure I had crucial focus, the photos didn't come out too badly. But I was in a rush to shoot the entire roll and get it developed to see if the camera was working, so I shot the entire thing in my house in pretty much a day. Honestly, I was very much not ready to be using an SLR. I didn't really understand what they could do, and all of the manual controls ended up being a bit daunting at the time. So if you're looking at getting an SLR early into photography career, don't stress out too much because you will learn everything just by using it. It just takes quite a while. I also managed to shoot a pretty much perfectly exposed flash photo, which I'm still surprised about to this day. So alongside trying out the SLR, I was also still putting rolls through my point and shoot. I was trying to get into the habit of carrying it with me every day and just sort of taking pictures of things that stood out to me. Some of them ended up coming out fairly nicely, and some of them ended up coming out like this. But everyone's been a victim of covering the lens with their finger at one point or another. For the most part, this role accompanied me on sort of nights out at the start of second year where I just wanted nice pictures of my friends, and it did okay for that purpose. I remember at the time really wanted to take nice pictures of my friends, but since I was new to photography and thought I was a lot better than I actually was, I didn't want to tell anyone I was taking a picture, which I guess made the image more real, but usable and nice? No. I do like this picture. It has some nice layers of both plant and brickwork to it. There is a small lens flare at the bottom and the highlights from the sun are blown out. But I'm a fan of the composition and I'm glad I took it as it was a slight departure from what the rest of the roll ended up looking like. Another roll and basically the exact same story, mostly just night out pictures. I promise these do actually get better soon. Although I do actually like some of these photos. After getting the last roll back, I did kind of actively try to make sure my subjects were a bit more aware that they were having their picture taken, and lo and behold, they resulted in better photos. Who could have guessed? Unfortunately, the Minolta Riva seemed to struggle a bit with the autofocus, especially when it was a bigger image. If there was a couple subjects at a couple different focal distances, it had a hard time choosing what to focus on. So a couple of them are out of focus. Here's a nice double exposure too, for good measure. And back to the Practica for middling results. I don't know why, but for some strange reason I just could not wrap my head around split prism focusing. I mean, it was a bit bold of me to go straight from autofocus to manual focus this early on, so maybe that explains it. These two pictures of a hanging butterfly aren't too bad. I think when I had a lot more time to just ensure that my focus was perfectly spot on, then it came out okay. And I also think I was shooting on 2.8 and didn't really understand how to change it. A lot of these images are out of focus, some by a little and some by a lot. And some are definitely worse than others. Getting these back was definitely off-putting, and it sort of signalled that I needed to put a bit more time and research into using the Practica. So I decided to dedicate my next role solely to making sure that I could use it properly. And this ended up being my first foray into black and white, something later down the line I would end up growing to love. But for now, I'd heard a lot about it and wanted to try it out, and since this was just going to be a practice roll, the cheaper alternative was chosen. Starting off the roll, this photo of my room is out of focus, but you can see that the aperture is set to a lot wider than in previous photos, so there's a little bit more leeway in the depth of field, and I think that shows that you can kind of make out some of the image rather than it just being one big blur. I then took a couple of images of my bathroom, a la grainy days, and I'm pretty happy with them. There's a nice silence in these images, and the low contrast black and white works wonders here. Given that the focus and the exposure are pretty much spot on here, it showed me that slowing down and really taking my time is the best method, especially in the early days, as this kind of laid the groundwork for me to be able to do it faster later down the line. And since it was snowing, it was only right to go outside and take a couple pictures in the snow, which unfortunately I didn't quite nail. But there was a cool scene outside my house of a trolley covered in snow, so I took this. Which also didn't come out too great, but as I was trying to improve my skills, I thought back to taking those pictures of the bathroom earlier, slowed down, took my time, and I took this, which I'm a lot happier with. There's another example of this later in the roll where I missed the photo that I was trying to take twice, but I get it right on the third time, which definitely isn't the most cost-effective use of film, but as a beginner, I'm really glad that I took the time to make sure that I got those shots, and I'm glad I spent a roll just trying to develop and hone in my skills specifically. Since there's normally quite a long period between shooting the film and getting your scans back as well, so you can sort of misremember what you shot, I made notes the entire time of what settings I was using and what I was photographing, so I could compare them, which definitely helped me, and I'd recommend it to other beginners too. For some of these rolls, especially ones out of the point and shoot, they are just kind of pictures from day to day that I've taken on my camera, so I'll just let those play out for you. I took the Practica with me on a trip to Leeds and I snapped these pictures there, which I'm pretty happy with overall. I took some more pictures in my room and then I decided to take it on a walk with my friends into the peaks. However, unbeknownst to me, at this point, the battery in the camera had completely died, leading to the metering being completely off. So there was a lesson I'll never forget again. There definitely isn't a lot to say about this roll. Most of it was shot on my friend Becky's birthday and led to some pretty lacklustre photos. I did enjoy taking individual portrait shots, although there is still definitely room for improvement. However, the standout shots of this roll are these of a broken car. There's something about them which I just really like. The 3 different compositions are all fairly interesting and came out nicely, so these were one of my favourite photos for a long time after that. Also, if you needed a visual for what I looked like at the time, don't worry, I've done the honours for you and shot myself. So at this point, I was pretty confident in shooting film, or at least I thought I was at the time, and me and my friends were heading out to a Tom Aston show, so I thought I'd bring my point and shoot with me and shoot some pictures there. To be perfectly honest, I'm a very harsh critic, but some of these photos just straight up suck. And it definitely didn't help being quite far back just with my point and shoot too. I think you do kind of get into your head what your photos at gigs are going to be like, and you think they're going to be sick, and more often than not, they're not. However, there are some from the roll that I do actually in fact like. They're by no means masterpieces, and some of them have like a weird canted angle to them, which I wouldn't normally shoot now, but I quite enjoy them, and I like the sense of like atmosphere and energy that the images have to them. Also, just as an experience, I did enjoy shooting at this gig, and I'd love to do it properly one day, and maybe even to take pictures of Tom Aston one day too. Be a nice full circle moment. Roll 18 seemed like a massive step up in my photography. I ended up going back to home and taking quite a few pictures I actually enjoyed. There's not too much to say about this roll in particular, but seeing these kind of colours and tones made me fall in love with Kodak Gold, which is a film I shoot a lot more of to this day. So I'm glad I did end up using it for this roll, because I like how the images came out and that sort of ambience that they have. Roll 19 followed suit with some images that I'm pretty happy with. At this point I'd moved into my second year house and became a little bit obsessed with the light coming down from the ceiling. But I love these pictures, and the slightly more dramatised lighting than normal really catches my eye. The latter half of the roll ended up catching the latter half of the aforementioned walk as well. I love the colours and composition of this one. There's a slight nice daydream feeling to it, which I do quite like. And there's also this photo of my friend Charlie, which I really like too. So back to the Practica, and shall we see if we actually managed to take a decent picture on it yet? The results are still no. However, there are still improvements. Compositionally, they're getting better, although I'm still failing on the manual controls. Either exposure or focus are normally just completely out, and sometimes it's a lovely combination of both. I'm a big fan of this photo of the water dripping off the rock. Definitely my favourite from the roll and probably from the Practica so far. After the walk, I was taking some pictures of Chile and I took this one, which I do like, although it does have some glaring issues, but since it was the best of a bad bunch, I had to take what I could get. I took my point and shoot with me to go see Young Lean, which led to a lot better results than with Tom Austin. Again, being in the crowd has its negatives, but I'm still a fan of these photos, and the lighting setup does add a lot, particularly in this photo, which is my favourite from the roll. Not a phone in sight either. I'm also a really big fan of this photo. I think the foreground has a really nice sense of motion to it, and the background looks really cool as well. Also featured on this roll was my first ever 140 event, which I got some really good pictures at. Me and my friends decided to head over to Copenhagen for a week, and I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to take some pictures. So I brought my point and shoot camera, and the film I decided to bring was Cinestill 400D, a film I'd never shot before to a city I'd never been before. But I'm pretty happy with the results I got. Unfortunately, the Minolta started acting up quite a lot on this trip. It took about 20 minutes to focus for this one particular shot, and it's definitely not worth it. Also, it ended up in me taking quite a lot of accidental photos, like this one, and this one. But for this role, I was mostly focused on just getting nice holiday pictures, which I think I definitely succeeded at. and luckily, along on the trip with me, I brought a second roll. Whilst Kentmere isn't a film that I shoot a lot of nowadays, it definitely performed very well in Copenhagen. Since the Minolta Riva doesn't have the sharpest or highest quality glass in the world, it leads the images to have sort of a blurred, ethereal look in the black and white, particularly this one of Lucy looking at an art piece. I'm also a huge fan of this photo of the exterior of Baggen, which is probably one of my favourites from the trip. I do wish I was shooting colour film here, but the sign still looks cool in black and white. This photo of myself in the Acne changing rooms has quite a nice surreal quality to it, although the Lego bag might slightly break that illusion. Overall, I'm a really big fan of both of these rolls from Copenhagen, particularly the latter, and maybe I'll go again, perhaps around the roll 51 mark. Another practice roll for the Practica, to varying degrees of success. It kind of sucks to look back and look at how much film I've wasted, but I guess you don't get better if you don't practice. So, my first time shooting 100 speed film, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Since the weather was particularly nice, I ended up taking it to the pub quite a lot and also on a couple walks as well. This photo of a bathroom window is a particular favourite. I just love the contrast between the shadows and the highlights. I'm also a really big fan of these photos from a hike. Whilst the focus is off on some of them, you can see that the compositions are slowly but steadily improving, which was a good sign to see. Particularly, I'm a big fan of this photo, which is probably my favourite from the entire roll. Heading down to Bath with my friend Harry for a slow tide gig. I took this picture whilst we were waiting in the queue, which I'm a really big fan of. And there was also this, which I was definitely disappointed to miss focus on, because it could have been a cool picture, but what can you do? However, once we got inside and I started taking some pictures of the gig, I was really pleased with how they came out. I love how the Colour Plus rendered the skin tones, along with sort of the ambient lighting in the room. The focus was also spot on, which was pretty surprising. But my one gripe again was I wish I'd just been a little bit closer to avoid having people's heads in the frame. For the latter half of the roll, I was in Berlin with my course mates, and just like any time in a foreign country, I was shooting pretty much anything and everything. I love both of these photos of the metro. The empty one has such a nice green tone to it, and the tunnel seems to bend and stretch forever, with the lights and the pillars slowly disappearing off into the distance. And this photo of Will and Grace I'm also a really big fan of. I like the heavy flash in the foreground, and you have that same green tone in the background too, which just makes for a really nice image. And also it's just a nice picture of my friends on holiday. On that same trip to Berlin, I ended up shooting a second roll, which is another roll of Kentmere 400. This ended up being a great roll. I'm actually really happy with a lot of these photos on this roll. I don't know whether it's just because we were in a foreign country and everything just ends up looking a lot cooler, or if I was just a really big fan of the trip and I love the photos because of that. But like I say, I was just a really big fan of them. In particular, I love this photo of the inside of a cinema. I initially walked past this and had to turn around and take the picture slightly later on, but I managed to capture this couple leaving the cinema, which I think really adds to the image. Personally, I do love backlit images, and this for me is a personal favourite. Alongside that, this photo of Ralph, Will and Brett on the subway is definitely a standout. I love the symmetry with Will and Brett's poses at either side of the frame, with Ralph sort of sandwiched in the middle between them. There's also a perfect amount of motion blur here, which gives the image a nice sense of life. Luckily, we managed to take this just before nearly getting arrested on that same subway. At this point, I started to show a lot more progress in my photography. I started to put a lot more thought behind the images I was taking, and because of that, I was getting a lot happier with the images I was getting back. And this boosting confidence would help massively, as when I returned back from Berlin, I had the opportunity to shoot Old Boy and Silver Bumper at Plot 22. So how did my first event go? All things considered, I think it went pretty well. I ended up taking a new camera with me, we'll go into that later, and quite a few rolls of film just as I wasn't sure how much I would be shooting. Looking back, I do definitely feel like I overshot and shot way too many pictures, but I was a bit nervous and I wanted to definitely get a couple actually good usable photos. So I decided it's probably better to overshoot than undershoot in this instance. This is also where I shot portrait for the first time ever, and I've got to agree with pretty much everyone else on the planet. It is one of the best films. The colours came out great, and so did the skin tones too. Although I'm not as big a fan of this roll, there are a couple images here and there that I do like, but the majority of them I was pretty disappointed with. The new camera I was shooting with was the Ricoh RZ750, which is a point and shoot that has considerably more features than the point and shoot I was using at the time. Featuring a zoom lens, manual flash and multiple exposure modes, I definitely had more options at my disposal, but since it was only my second time using it, I was a bit overwhelmed and a bit out of my depth, so that wasn't the smartest decision. However, I was using the multiple exposure mode and it created these sort of blurry atmospheric photos, which I am a big fan of. Fortunately, I also bought my Minolta Riva with me at the time and had some Candido 200 loaded into that. Unfortunately, the Candido 200 was not the best choice in this instance. I do think that this super high contrast between the shadows and the light resulted in a lot of the skin tones just being way too bright and blown out. There are a couple of photos that I like from this roll, but to be honest, they're few and far between, and the majority of them were quite disappointing. And since Bad Things come in threes, we might as well complete it, as I wasn't happy with this roller Cinestill either. I think the combination of a high-speed film and also shooting flash led to the images just being super blown out and a bit too bright, which is a common theme for the rest of the roll. However, where the Cinestills seem to shine is in these three pictures of the snow. All of which I'm a massive fan of, especially the last one with the traffic light covered in snow. People seem to really like that one. The last of the roll caught a couple portraits at my friend Lucy's birthday. Particular favourites are this one of Adam and Chili, and then also this one of just Adam by himself. It has quite a nice impromptu sort of paparazzi-esque feel to it, which I really enjoy. This roll I actually shot the day that I got the Ricoh to sort of test it out and just see if the camera was working, but due to black and white developing times, I only just got it back now. There isn't really much to say about these rolls. I was kind of just testing out the features and seeing what works. I like these pictures in my room, but that's really about it. Having enjoyed the first time I shot portrait, I decided to load it again, and this time I loaded it at plot 22 and caught the last couple of stills of the evening on it. I think I used the multiple exposure mode on the RZ750 to get this image, and it sort of gives it that blur and haze, which I really like. For the rest of the roll, I took a series of portraits on a staff night out, which came out great. I think this is where portrait really shines. Obviously everyone uses it for studio portrait shoots, and that's what it works best for. It's really great at capturing skin tones, and just generally colours seem to come out great on it. After these 2 rolls, whilst not getting the most out of the portrait that I should do, I can still attest to it being definitely one of the best film stocks ever. It was my friend's graduation day and I decided to take my camera with me to take some portraits of them, and given my history of using the Praktica, I definitely wasn't too hopeful, and I don't blame you guys for not being hopeful either, but they didn't come out too bad. I definitely could have exposed these better. A lot of the subjects seem to sort of fade away into the background as it's busier, so some separation would have been nice. But honestly, I was just happy to get a full roll out of the Praktica for once. And whilst not the best photos in the world, it was just nice to have a sign that I was slowly but surely improving. The RZ750 quickly turned out to be quite a formidable camera, as it was very quickly turning around some of my favourite images I've ever taken. From this role in particular, I'm a really big fan of this self-portrait and also this photo of my brother playing the bass. I just love how it's caught the light reflecting on it. It's pictures like those that show how useful the RZ's optional flash is. It's not even like you have to change camera modes or anything. The flash will automatically pop up, but if you just simply hold it down, the camera knows you don't want to shoot with flash and adjusts its settings accordingly. I wish this was a feature present in a lot more point and shoots, as it just makes the whole shooting experience easier, and also you have that little bit extra bit of manual control, which can help you create more meaningful photos. I mostly just shot this roll around my house, so a lot of the photos aren't really anything crazy. However, there are 2 standouts from the roll. This photo of a runner came out great. I remember waiting about 10 minutes to get this perfect shot as I was waiting for the perfect amount of people to go by, and I'm really glad that the wait paid off. I'm a really big fan of just the harsh angular lighting and how there's only a singular subject in the photo and he's just about to leave the frame. Alongside that photo, the other good photo from the roll is this photo of a solidarity banger hanging over a bridge. I was pretty rushed when taking this and I shot it whilst walking, so I didn't have a lot of faith in it coming out, but it did come out great in the end, which I'm very thankful for. I think this stands as a testament to all of those prior photos that I've shot inside the house where I've had time to slowly develop my skills, because if I didn't put those hours in, I wouldn't have been able to quickly and hurriedly take something like this. So I guess the about 20 rolls of bad photos through the Praktica have now paid off. One thing I'm incredibly grateful for my friends letting me do is take pictures of them constantly. And this is what this roll ended up being, just a nice little portrait test shoot with my housemate Adam. At this point, I was getting pretty confident with using the Praktica, at least confident that I could get a roll of images back. And I wanted to sharpen my portrait skills, and since Adam was willing, we had a test shoot. Whilst these photos aren't the best, there are a couple that I did end up liking. More importantly, however, it made me realise that I really enjoy using natural light to light my photos, and this is something that I've kind of carried with me the entire time. I much prefer using the natural light that's around rather than using a flash or something else like that. I could also tell that my exposures were improving just that little bit more, and I was also getting confident with how to use different apertures to my advantage. Like I say, the majority of the roll wasn't anything too crazy, but these three are definitely my favourites. So I'm sure you're all wondering what 38.5 means, and it means something went drastically wrong. To this day, I still have no idea what actually happened with this roll, but I only got 4 photos out of this roll, and I'm going to use the term photos very loosely here, as I'll show you. So yeah, not exactly sure what went wrong here, but hence the 38.5. Moving swiftly on. For those keen-eyed viewers amongst you, you might have noticed we've just unlocked a new camera. At this point I was getting some pretty serious gas, and I decided it was time to treat myself to a new little point and shoot, that being the Canon SureShot Ace, one of my favourite cameras of all time. Compared to the RZ750, it is fairly stripped back in terms of features. It only has one shooting mode, but it does have a cool waist level viewfinder and also a built-in remote for timer pictures. So let's see how the camera held up. I'd say it held up pretty well. I took it out on a staff do and the pictures came out great from that. The lens is sharp and clear and finds focus pretty quickly, and the camera is equally good, if not better, in daylight. I was really happy to get these images back, pleased with how they came out. Again, there really isn't too much to say with this roll in particular. However, you do get to see the one outstanding benefit of using the RZ750 is that you can take multiple exposure photos like this one. So each time I shoot portrait, it seems to get better and better than the last time, and with the third time, that was no exception. I took this picture of a carousel, which I really enjoy. I think the colours are spot on and the motion blur is just perfect to creating like a sort of really nice dreamlike ambience to the whole thing. As I was saving the portrait for a special event, I decided that that year's 140 event was as good a time as any to load it up and take some pictures. And they ended up coming out great. I'm a massive fan of all of these photos and I think they're just such a step up from last year's pictures too. I'm a really big fan of all of the portraits of my friends, and the closer up ones of the DJs and MCs performing are great too. I think it was really nice to see the camera, the film and my skills all improve in that year time, and it was just a nice benchmark to see how far I'd come. I went from strength to strength for the next roll, as I was really happy to get these back too. These were mostly pictures from an awards show, which I was really happy with, and just some quiet moments in between for that month. Since it was Christmas time and I was heading home, I decided to take the practical with me to have a little bit more time to practice and sort of get comfortable with it. After having those last couple of rolls come out pretty happy, I decided it would be a good experiment. I started off by taking a couple pictures around my house, and then once I got home I started shooting there too. Whilst by no means perfect images, it is really nice, as I keep saying, to see my skills improve, and it's just affirming to see better pictures coming out slowly but surely. I think my favourites of these rolls would be these two bracketed pictures of the shed next door. I think they just came out great, and they seem to work really well with the film grain. I guess it was time for another special opportunity, as my first ever experience working on the set was just around the corner, so I decided to load up some more portrait to shoot this time. On the day, I decided to meet up with my friend Harry and take a couple test portraits before heading down to the studio to shoot behind the scenes for my atelier. Like I said, this was my first experience being on a set, and I was just really nervous and I wasn't really too sure what to expect, but everyone was really lovely and nice and pretty comfortable getting a picture taken, so I just started taking loads of pictures. Unfortunately, a lot of these pictures ended up coming out blurry or just plain bad. Like I say, I wasn't really sure what to shoot, and when I get nervous, like at plot 22, I just tend to overshoot. However, I am a big fan of these two pictures from that roll. And luckily, I brought a couple extra rolls and my point and shoot with me to take some more pictures. So this is a roll that started my long-standing but pretty one-sided beef with lomography film stocks. Apart from, of course, Potsdam. They can never make me hate you, Potsdam. I'm just personally not a fan of how this stock renders colours, and especially skin tones. They just all came out super white and super bright, which isn't a look I personally go for. The whole roll itself came out with this kind of cold blue tint to it, which is fine for pictures like this, where it sort of works with that photo, but not for most of them. Speaking of Potsdam 100, this was my first ever time shooting it, and it very quickly became a favourite of mine. Since it's a much slower speed film, it didn't come out with the perfectly exposed photos I was imagining. It sort of had this more subdued, darker tone to it, which I'm a massive fan of, especially in shots like these where it works well for these silhouette style photos. The film also came out really nicely when I was using a hot shoe flash, like in these images here. However, these three images are definitely standouts from this roll, and I still enjoy seeing them today. Here's the last couple photos from that day on set. The RZ was really useful to use as its zoom lens sort of cuts off any borders of the set, making it feel a lot more closed in and personal. Overall, I'm a massive fan of everything I shot that day and just my experience working on that set. Not to say the images were perfect, but I felt like it was a really important experience for me to learn and a really big milestone in my own photography journey. The rest of that role caught a trip down to London to see my friend Chile. These images are okay, but the standout is definitely this photo of a double exposure of Chile. Personally, I love doing double exposures. I think they come out so cool, and I'd love to do more, apart from the fact that Nathan broke my RZ750. So shout out to Nathan. And just when I was getting comfortable using the Practica, and just when you guys were getting comfortable expecting results out of the Practica, this happened. However, with this roll, I'm going to claim that it is not my fault. I don't even remember buying this roll of Colour Plus. It just sort of turned up in my film drawer and I shot it. But clearly it had been shot before, either a very long time ago or exposed in some way, which led to this. Not ideal, but these things happen. Following on from working with Made by Atelier, I had the opportunity to shoot behind the scenes for them yet again, this time at the fashion show. I took a couple warm-up pictures at the rehearsal and just some in and around the venue to sort of get me feeling comfortable and confident. And then when the show started, I headed up to the balcony and started shooting. Now, keen-eyed viewers amongst you might be able to tell that these photos are a little bit blurry. Unfortunately, just due to how far away I was and the speed of film I was using, I had to shoot way slower than was necessary, and it just led to all of the images basically being a complete blur. This was definitely disappointing, but to make the most out of a bad roll, I decided to chop all the photos together to form this little video loop, to at least get something out of a bad roll. "50 rolls in and I'm still making mistakes. Who would have guessed?" I managed to snap a couple pictures on my point and shoot at the Atelier event, which didn't come out too badly and definitely a lot better than those that came out of the Practica. And if you'll remember from earlier, it's roll 51, so it's time to return to Copenhagen. And this time we actually brought a working point and shoot. Straight off the plane, I managed to take this shot, which is an absolute banger. It's just in the underground station at the airport, and I really love it. It's definitely one of my favourites. And after that, the rest of the roll isn't anything too impressive. I don't mind these images. I like sort of the atmospheric roll off due to the fog, but that's about it. I bought this respooled cinema film a while ago and decided this was the perfect opportunity to shoot it. And since it was daylight balanced, I took it out during the day and shot quite a few scenes just around Copenhagen to see how it held up. And pretty well is the answer to that. I really like this image where you see the tower just sort of fade away into the background and it's sort of blocked by these two nice foreground elements. And for the scenic shots, I think it came out really well too. The cool tones mixed with the fog on the day really nicely to give this really great ambience to the images. And while most of the images came out pretty similar, just a single subject surrounded by fog, I'm pretty happy with them. Since hindsight's 2020, I do kind of wish I brought an SLR with me on this trip as well, just because I feel like with a bit more refining and a bit more creative control, these images could have a really nice like Edward Hopper feel to them, but that's just a lesson for next time. However, I feel like I really hit my stride shooting black and white here. I really like this photo from the meatpacking district where it's just super high contrast and the neon lights from inside the building are sort of shooting out into the darkness. This is a photo that topped my website for a long time. I don't know what it is exactly about the image, but it's a particular one of my favourites. I don't know whether it's like the sort of absurdity of it, or maybe I'm just a really big cowboy fan. I don't know what there is about it, but I just really like it. These photos of the inside and outside of a conservatory are also among my favourites, as well as this particular one shot inside a vintage store. I'm not sure exactly what happened to this roll of XP2 or what kind of blessing someone put on it, but these images just all came out beautifully. And to finish this trip off, we headed back to the airport station and I took this photo. I really love this photo. It's the slight canted angle, the spots of underexposure but with the daylight peeking through, and I think it's really nice that I managed to bookend the trip with two actually good shots. There isn't really too much for me to say about this roll aside from constantly just repeating how happy I am with the photos and how much I like them, but I guess after 52 rolls of me being disappointed, it's a nice palate cleanser, but don't fret too much. I'm back to my usual ways for roll 54. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, or according to the stats, 100% gentlemen, it is time to introduce a new camera into the fold. Jimmy from my local lab, shout out to Jimmy and shout out to JNA2, was selling his Context 139Q. and offered me a great price on it. And since my practica was basically falling apart at this point, it seemed like a sign. And if by sign I mean a massive improvement in everything, then yeah, it was a sign. The Contax is a great camera. It's super lightweight. It's not the most feature heavy, but it is consistently reliable. And Jimmy sold me it with a nice 50mm Carl Zeiss lens on it too, which admittedly does do a lot of the heavy lifting. This test roll I shot on it though is not great. Like test rolls of the past and future, I just shot it in my house the day that I got it just to check everything was working and to try and get accustomed to the camera. Obviously these photos aren't great. The focus is a lot easier to nail on this when compared to the Practica, or at least I felt like there was an improvement in that section, but still these are all just test images like I said. But I was really excited to be using a better camera and something that I felt a lot more confident using too. This roll of Agfa had pretty much the same fate as the roll before, just mostly being used with the Contax to get a bit more comfortable with it. These photos aren't anything too crazy. I do like this sort of blurry oncoming traffic shot, but a higher honour is bestowed upon one shot from this roll, as it is the profile picture of this very here YouTube channel. I know, don't all freak out at once. All jokes aside though, I do really like this shot. I actually took two at this moment, although the one with the little bit of motion blur, I think I am more a fan of. At this point, just to sort of further practice my photography skills, I was just heading out a lot on my days off, walking around parks and places around Sheffield, just to kind of see what there was to photograph and what I could kind of test with the Contax to try and get more comfortable and really push myself out of the kind of photos I was taking at the time. A lot of these aren't great. There's a couple of pictures of cars which will sort of be expanded upon in a couple of rolls time, but the main standout from this is definitely this photo of the pigeon. A lot of people really like this photo. I thought that I didn't get it at the time. Like, I frankly got scared by the pigeon and thought I missed the shot completely, and it wasn't what I was going for. I just wanted the pigeon on top of the signpost, but unfortunately the timing was just too perfect, I guess, and this is the result. I don't mind it, but I think because there was a lack of intentionality to it, I can't really say like it's a favourite, but it's still cool, I guess. So it was around this point that I'd started this YouTube channel, and my first video was just a sort of camera collection, but my second video I wanted to actually go out and buy a camera and shoot a roll through it. So I was perusing eBay looking for sort of strange cameras, and I came across this, the Lomography Fisheye 2. It's a funny little thing, the Fisheye 2. It is basically just a toy camera. Like, the fisheye photos aren't particularly the highest quality, and it's basically just made of plastic. But it can produce some kind of decent fun images. I took it down to an all-boys show and mostly just took pictures of my friends, and if for nothing else, the camera makes for great profile pictures. For some reason as well, with every picture of me, I just got absolutely blasted by the flash, so maybe it's not the best camera to use if you've got a complexion like my own. Also, shout out to Harry for taking this one. It's definitely my favourite shot from the roll, and a really interesting use of the camera. So if you remember 2 minutes ago when I said that the photos of cars would be expanded upon, wait no longer. At this point, I was kind of struggling with what to shoot. I had the time to shoot and I had the film to shoot, but I feel like my work lacked any sort of cohesion. So I decided to give myself a project, titled it Idle Engines, and basically, whenever I'd have a day off, I'd just walk around and photograph cars, which is groundbreaking, I know. But some of these shots I actually really like, and it was nice to be taking pictures with a bit more purpose and having sort of a clearer end goal in sight, which was nice too. I don't really think there's anything too crazy here, but it sort of laid the foundation for more pictures later down the line. Speaking of this YouTube channel, I was heading down to London to visit my friend Chili and get a tattoo, and since I was down there for 12 hours, I decided why not sort of challenge myself and see if I could shoot a roll of film in that time. And surprisingly, I'm a really big fan of a lot of these photos. I think the combination of both the time crunch and just London generally being quite a visually interesting and entertaining place to photograph led to some really great results. The first photo that I took was on my changeover at Doncaster, and I quickly hurriedly saw this scene and took this picture, which I'm a massive fan of. I think the composition is just really, really great. I really like the sort of traditional composition of it and just how timeless it sort of feels. Don't get me wrong, I was a bit rushed. I literally turned around, took the picture, turned back and moved on, but I'm still a really big fan of it. And whilst, yeah, I probably could have moved so there wasn't a massive pole in the middle of the shot, I'm still pretty happy with it. The other standout from the roll is definitely this portrait of Chile. I really like the contrast between like the light side and the dark side of his face here, and I think it does a really good job to show Kodak Gold's tones and why it's a favourite for so many people, including myself. So back to more car photos. The context is really proving its worth here. I do really like a lot of these shots, but I was sort of trying to get a bit more abstraction, and instead of just taking pictures of cars, take pictures of the places where the cars shouldn't be or where they should be and aren't. I think that leads to a slightly more entertaining photo. Like, this photo of the back of a Subaru is really cool and it's a really nice photo, but this photo of a garage door with a smashed window is infinitely more interesting to me. And it is still in keeping with the theme, but kind of pushes it outwards a little bit, which I really enjoy. So yeah, overall, I think from this roll and going forwards, I'm a fan of the little bit more abstract ones. I like some of the other photos on this roll. This was another day of just sort of wandering around and seeing which scenes piqued my interest. I really like this particular shot of the open shed door and this shot of a garage, which we might be revisiting soon. And we're back to the garage. I prefer these couple shots to the ones in roll 63, but my favourite is definitely this one where the car's bumper is slightly peeking into frame. Like I said, just that slight added bit of abstraction makes for a more interesting photo. This roll was pretty much the same as before, just kind of walking around and seeing what looks good. I really like this shot of the broken wing mirror. I feel like I was getting so much practice and I was beginning to feel really confident with focusing, framing and just making sure my exposures were spot on. I mean, you'd hope so after 64 rolls, an entire stack. Elsewhere on this roll, I found some abandoned cars, which also made for some pretty good photos too. And I'm a really big fan of this shot of the back of a car with a load of stickers on it. I really like that you can see my own reflection in it. I think just generally because of the stickers, it's quite just like a funny image too, which is nice. And I also like how the longer you end up looking at it, the more stickers you find. The rest of this roll was alright. It wasn't anything too crazy, but I was excited to return back to shooting colour for the next roll, and I'm really glad that I did. For some reason, the colours in this roll were just absolutely spot on. I mean, I suppose it is in the name for a reason, but they just ended up coming out really great, and there's a couple ones where the colours are just absolutely perfect. I really like this shot of the middle of the table tennis table. And then after a couple more pictures of cars, I took this banger, which I'm really happy with. I did nearly miss it as they were just going around the corner, but I'm really happy that I got it. After that, there's some more pictures of cars. I promise guys, the photos of cars will stop soon. I'm equally as bored of them as you are. This is one of those shots I was on about before where the colours are just perfect. The blue is just so nice to look at, and even the little scratches came out really nice. The shot itself is a little bit overexposed, you can see when you look down at the tyre, but overall I really like it, and just that blue is just so dominant within the entire scene. And again, this shot of the back of a Mazda is just beautiful. The little highlights from the sun and the shallow depth of field made for a really nice image overall, and I like that it just takes up the entirety of the image pretty much. There's just this expanse of red. And shortly after seeing that car, I saw this one, which is not only great advertising, but just a really cool shot in my opinion. After those though, the rest of the roll is pretty lackluster. I do like this image of the guard dog sign with the shadow of the building in the back. And I also captured this one of these two men looking at this open shed door, presumably thinking about what a cool film photo it would make. So back to the point and shoot for a little bit for a couple more like random shots. I found this pretty cool abandoned car. And then it was Adam's birthday, so I took a couple nice pictures from that. And then myself and Nathan headed down to Manchester for a day event, so I got a couple pictures there. Like I said before, this roll isn't anything too crazy. I like the photos from Adam's birthday the best, I think, but it's just a lot of personal shooting, really. So my friend Sam sold me a couple of cameras, and one of which was this Yashica rangefinder. And since I never shot a rangefinder before, I was like, oh, perfect opportunity. Loaded in some Kent mirror into it, and let's see how the photos came out. And unfortunately it came out completely blank. So yeah, I haven't retested this camera yet. I do want to get it fixed and put a roll through it because I did enjoy using the rangefinder. I'd like to use an actual rangefinder later. Personally, I found the focusing system a bit better than split prism, or at least a bit more intuitive for myself, but there's no results to speak of, so I guess we'll just leave it at that. So for this roll, I was heading back home to Hull for a couple of days, and I decided why not shoot some pictures around the HU5 just to fill in some time. And I actually really like a lot of these pictures that came back. It's pretty rare for me to like so many from one roll, but I was pretty impressed, which was nice. They're just quite nice. I do feel like my black and white work is definitely a bit better than my colour work, or at least I see them as better photographs, at least instantly. And I think that definitely will show throughout this entire 100 roll video that my black and white work tends to be the one I prefer more. Not always, but personal preference. I'd love to make a longer project and spend some time shooting in HU5 and seeing what kind of images I can get, because I always like going there to take pictures, but it's always a rush trip. So for now, these shots will have to suffice. Since I was a couple of years into my film photography journey at this point, I decided it was time to finally bite the bullet and try out this slide film that everyone had been talking about. So I got my hands on some of the mystical Ektachrome and took out on a stroll. These first couple of exposures are pretty good. There is a noticeable blue cast over all of the images. I think that's just from the slide film. But apparently this can be sort of rectified when scanning at home, or basically if you rescan your images and alter them. I'm a really big fan of this shot of the back of the van with the two England flags on it. You really get to see that pop that you get with the slide film, and the purple is just lovely, and I'm really glad that at this moment I had the Ektachrome loaded. We returned to Gelder's garage and I took a couple more shots, which I massively prefer. I really like how much character and colour the sky has, especially when in comparison to the nearly opaque windows of the building. I took this shot in a moped window that was inspired by a shot in Max Kessel's Where the Sun Sets on Oyster Bay, which is a fraction as good as the original. That's the original there. Shout out to Max. This shot is layered really nicely and just feels quite vast, which I like. And this final shot is also pretty cool. I'm glad that the orangey yellow manages to stand out. Overall, I really enjoyed my first experience shooting with slide film. It's an interesting, different approach to take sometimes because your exposures have to be so pinpoint accurate, which is something that I personally struggle with. But it's really exciting to get to see the difference between colour positive and colour negative film, and just getting to try out a new film is cool anyway. And also double cool that the negatives are in colour, because that's worth it alone. Ahead of shooting something pretty cool, I had to conduct a flash test, as I never really shot with a hot shoe flash and didn't really know how the different settings would come out. And since I needed it for this upcoming shoot, I needed to conduct the test. So thank you again for Adam for letting me constantly flash him in the name of the film photography journey. Although the results were overall pretty indeterminable. So it's now time to reveal what I was shooting that was pretty cool, and it was my first ever gig. Up until this point, I'd never really shot a band before, so when my friend Ralph was playing with his band, The Italian Fiasco, and asked me to shoot it, I was more than happy to do it. And in classic Harry Shoots People fashion, I for some reason decided to try something new and shot with Ilford Delta 3200 for the first ever time. Primarily because I was scared of using the flash because I thought it'd go wrong. And even at 3200 ISO, there still surprisingly wasn't enough light to shoot at any quicker than 1/30th. So a lot of these images are pretty blurred. I am still a fan of some of these images though. They came out pretty well in my opinion. This one's a particular favourite from the roll. I like the contrast of sort of like just the darkness in the left and the neon on the right hand side of the frame. I just think it came out quite well, and I like the silhouette too. Luckily though, I'd brought another roll with me that evening. So if you thought the 3200 didn't provide enough light, then 400 definitely won't. And it definitely didn't. But in all honesty, I'm a really big fan of these photos. It's kind of lame to constantly use the excuse of like the slow shutter speed captures the feeling, but I think it does a perfect job of that here. And also, I like how weird and like experimental they come across, with Ralph and the other band members moving so quickly that even as shallow as I was trying to shoot, it still sort of in some frames just looks like there's no one there because they were moving through two different places way too quickly, which I also think is kind of cool. I'm also kind of a really big fan of how much like the red neon just invades every single frame. I think it gave it sort of this weird thematical look, which I kind of like. I mean, I'd sooner rather shoot that than Harmon red pretty much any day of the week, but hey. This is definitely my favourite shot from the roll. It just came out so nice, and the contrast between the super red reds and the super dark blacks is really cool. So this month ended up being a pretty big deal for me. I just finished that shoot for Italian Fiasco, and then only a week later I shot an event in Manchester for System 3. It was such a sick event and loads of great photos came out of it. I shot a couple rolls here, and the first of which was this Ultramax, and yeah, to be honest, it went really well. I'd warmed up a little bit after the first roll and I was getting a bit more comfortable taking pictures on the night. Normally it does take me about a roll to warm up and actually start taking good pictures in an event, and thankfully that was the case here too. I really like this particular photo. I'm a really big fan of the hard flash creating that dark shadow, and I do wish I got a little bit closer and got it in focus, but it's still a good photo in my opinion. This one's nice too. I like the flash, and the neon sign in the background is pretty cool too. Also a pretty big win for me, this photo got used as the picture for a SoundCloud mix, so that was pretty cool too. So shout out to Oldboy. Luckily, the venue had two sets of stairs going up from the second floor, and I was able to get a nice perspective from up there. And when I paired that with a slow shutter speed, I ended up with this, which I'm a really big fan of this image. This one's also a favourite, and I've come to realise that this is a kind of shot that I try to get at every event I shoot, and it almost always comes out nicely. Plus, I actually shot this a second beforehand, but felt like something was off, and it was. The photo ended up overexposed and out of focus. So I took it again, which was an important lesson, and I'm glad that I shot it twice. Up until this point, I'd never shot T-Max 400 and I wanted to try something new, so I loaded it into my point and shoot and I was really impressed by it. I really like how it holds up in basically every lighting situation, in daylight and in night. It looks great in both. I ended up taking my point and shoot back to Hull with me, and I took a couple nice pictures with it. I really like this one from the train station the morning I left. The light breaking through the station ceiling is really nice, and the pigeon in the centre is a nice subject too. I think photos like this is really where black and white shines through. I don't think I'd like this nearly as much if it was colour film, but there's something nice about the simplicity of it and the dramatisation when it's in monochrome. Like I said before, I was really happy with how this roll came out. There's quite a few on here I really like, and there's a couple more from that event that I'm really happy with. Particularly this photo of Henry. And then this photo of the back of someone's head, which just came out so perfect with the glint of the flash catching on his glasses. So, the start of this roll caught the last couple of shots from the System 3 event. I like this shot of Nat in the Simon Watley jacket, and along with this shot of Old Boy playing, that's also a personal favourite. And for the rest of this roll, I ended up shooting some behind the scenes content for like a Made by Atelier shoot day, but since this was on my point and shoot, it was kind of my side camera from the day, although I ended up with some photos that I quite liked. I especially like this landscape shot from the rooftop, and alongside this photo of Adam and Lucy, which I also really like. It's a shame because this photo from inside the tunnel would have been really nice if it weren't for this one random stranger ruining the frame, but hey, it's only a point and shoot. So this was my primary camera for the day, and I was a lot more impressed with the results out of this than I was with the Sure Shot. Don't get me wrong, the Sure Shot can produce great results like that aforementioned photo of Adam and Lucy, but the additional control that you get with the SLR really is unmatched. The only caveat for this roll was the actual choice of film itself. Fomapan is pretty low contrast and came out quite great, which isn't it really a look that I aspire to. However, I do like most of these shots. Like I said before, I was up on that rooftop and I was able to get these nice high angle pictures looking down on some of the models. I really like this set of photos of Harry and Adam. They just came out really nice, and they're quite light-hearted too, which I really like, and it shows the behind the scenes of shooting on set, which was quite fun too. I also like these images of sort of the setup that Morgan was shooting. These are pretty cool, the table and all the different poses. Came out quite nicely. There isn't really a definitive favourite from this roll, but these photos of Adam when I was shooting with flash came out really nicely, and I'm just really happy with them. I think they look cool, and I like that they're closer up and a bit more portraiture, which is something I like. Also, this image I sort of candidly shot whilst we were in the warehouse is also pretty cool in my opinion. And these next couple of rolls were again a massive step forward in my career as I returned back to Made by Atelier, this time for a different shoot day, but this one was a lot bigger and I shot a lot more film and I'm so much happier with the results. Okay, so like I said before, it was my second time shooting with Made by Atelier, but it was my first time shooting on an actual set. So I was really excited, but again, really nervous. I got there early and for this first roll I was sort of just walking around the warehouse, taking pictures of the set and sort of waiting for everyone to get ready, taking some smaller pictures in between those moments. It was really cool to be involved with this part of the process as well. It was really nice to see everyone sort of like almost warming up for the day, the outfits getting chosen and styled in different ways, and seeing how people filled their time in between like their personal photos that we've been taking. It was just really interesting and I think I got quite a few nice photos out of it too. There's a fair few shots from this first roll that I really like. This picture of Adam and Harry is really nice, and again, I really like this one of Harry and Jazz. I feel like this day is really where I got the best out of the contacts. It really proved itself, and I was happy to have such like a consistently good SLR with me on that day. Whilst I'm still a fan of the photos out of this roll, unfortunately I was swapping between my 50mm lens and my 135mm lens, and there just kind of wasn't enough light for the 135mm lens to shoot so close up. So a lot of these pictures ended up coming out blurry and just not great, which was disappointing to say the least, but I'm still happy with the ones that I got on the 50mm lens. Also, it was my first time using that lens outside the house, so probably not the best idea. Also, like I said earlier, I was quite nervous on this day, and when I get nervous I don't really know what to do. I do tend to overshoot, so I'd consider a lot of these photos to be unnecessary, but it's just because I was nervous, I didn't really know what to do, so I sort of filled my time with taking pictures. However, there are a couple that I'm a really big fan of. This one in particular is a standout favourite. I really love the background being the CRT monitors, and the single subject it pairs really well and it came out quite nicely. This one of Harry is super fun too. It's a really great use of the shallow depth of field, although looking back I think now perhaps maybe it's slightly too shallow, but that's what everyone does when they get like a 2.8 or 1.8 I guess. So this is the final roll of 35mm that I shot that day, and it came out pretty well again. I'm pretty happy with these. There was a really cool lighting setup being used on that day, so I managed to steal it for a couple of shots, and a professional lighting setup really does make your photos better. I was also trying to get a lot more like behind the scenes shots and ones from different vantage points, like with this shot here. These ones of Adam are really, really cool. I really just like how strong and harsh that red lighting is throughout the whole set of them. I really do like this blurry one of Jess as well. This is another occasion where I shot it the first time and the shutter speed just felt a little bit too slow and it didn't really feel like I got it. So I shot it again and it came out so much better, which I was really happy with. And I think being able to do that on film as well shows how much I've grown, like as a photographer, I guess you'd say, because sort of being able to anticipate having not got the shot you wanted without seeing it and taking that extra precaution just in case and improving on your shots whilst being there in the moment, I think is a really good sign. And it's nice to see after putting 80 rolls through my camera that I know when it's going to be a bad one. Like I've said, I'm a really big fan of the 35mm photos from that day, but I ended up bringing my RB67 and everything that I shot on medium format I'd consider to be about easily 10 times better than any of those pictures that you've just seen. So if you'd like to see more of that day and the medium format pictures, the video's up on my channel now. Anyway. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to pick up a new camera at this point, and I was really, really excited because it's one that I'd heard so much about, like, in the prior year of taking pictures, and that camera is a Contax G1. Those familiar with the channel will know that this is kind of a staple camera for me nowadays, at least. I mean, I'm slowly getting better with it, but that pertains to be seen. I think that this camera and buying it symbolised a massive step up in like my film photography journey, my like photography career, and just generally my confidence in myself as a photographer. And I'm happy to, since buying it, I would say my photography has improved. Maybe. But anyway, I had to head out to Manchester to go and pick up the camera, and I decided whilst I was there I'd shoot a quick roll through it just to see that the camera was all working fine. Unfortunately though, these photos aren't anything crazy. Like I say, it was literally my first time picking up the camera, first time using it, so these photos are really just quick ones to see. It was my first time even shooting a 28mm lens too. I am happy with this shot of the lady carrying her shopping. Kind of took this one half accidentally and I was quite impressed with how it came out. And this one with the sort of the pigeon and its head not quite lining up is quite funny too. But for the most part, just test pictures. Camera proved itself, it was pretty good, but it definitely took some getting used to. Also, strangely enough, the video that I made on this day led to the highest viewed video on my channel so far, which is really nice, but it's also quite a poor representation of my photography. But if you want to go check that out, sort by most popular, it's up there. And you'll see those two pictures. So yeah. So after putting one mediocre roll through the G1, I decided that it was time for a holiday, and I took it with me on a trip to Malta with my friends. I do quite like some of these from this first roll. Like I said before, I was just kind of getting used to shooting on the G1 and using the 28mm and like sort of framing and posing with that. But I certainly kind of hit my stride a little bit with this, especially compared to roll 81. I really like these two photos of Chile at the beach, but unfortunately they're just kind of missing that critical focus, which kind of detracts from the image in my opinion. That's something that I've noticed definitely continues forward in my usage of the G1. Sometimes the camera does struggle to hit that absolute critical focus, But I was speaking to someone the other day and they said that potentially that's also due to the lens. So maybe with the 45 or the 90mm lens, it's a bit easier to get that critical focus. So maybe that's something to try in the future when they're not a bajillion pounds. The Sure Shot continues to impress with this roll of Pro Image that I find myself shooting quite a lot in point and shoots. I find it quite an easy stock to get good images out of. Particularly, I do like this photo of Henry and these two from a free party, but where it really stepped up was when we got to Malta. This image of the red door is absolutely lovely. The lighting and the choice of film came out perfectly here. And this other image of my friends looking off into the distance is an all-time favourite for myself. I also love this image of my friend Lucy relaxing on a boat trip. Strangely, it bears a striking resemblance to an image from this book, which was a very bizarre coincidence to find out later. Unfortunately, that classic lack of critical focus came back to bite me here as we were on this bus journey out to one of the islands, and there was this lovely sort of Baroque-esque lighting shining down from the top of the bus, so just landing beautifully on my friend Rebecca here. And since I didn't manage to get that critical focus, the image just kind of came out flat and boring, which was really disappointing because it could have been really, really nice. It had sort of this one beam of light just shining through the rest of the image, but it was a nice idea, I guess, but the execution just wasn't perfect, which it's disappointing. The rest of the roll does suffer from that exact same fate. Unfortunately, the G1's autofocus is reliably unreliable, and whilst now I can say that I've gotten used to it and my hit rate on it is just that tiny bit higher, back then when I was still getting used to it, it was quite disappointing, and most of these images came out disappointingly hazy and out of focus. This shot of Chile is kind of fun and nice too, though. So this roll is pretty cool because it was my first ever time trying out Portra 160, and the results were pretty cool. This was the last roll I ended up loading in Malta, and I loaded it on a day trip out to Gozo and the Blue Lagoon. And yeah, like I said, results came out really nice. I particularly love this image of the lady on the boat trip. I think the blue came out lovely, and just the slight glimpse of her tattoo work really well together. Initially, I was trying to capture this lady and her child, as her child was sort of looking in the opposite direction, and I thought it would make for a really nice, contradictory image, but unfortunately, the child was just moving a bit too quick, and I ended up leaving before I could get properly the image composed I wanted. But I'm still very, very much happy with the one that I've ended up with. I ended up shooting most of this roll at the Blue Lagoon, and it was fun to just get some fun holiday pictures with friends of like doing cool stuff and like nice pictures of the water, which was really cool. And then the day after that was our last day in Malta, so I ended up taking a couple more pictures just in and around Malta of anything quickly that I saw on our last day that would make for a nice photo. And then came home and immediately went to an atelier event that evening and shot more images on that same roll of Portrait 160. And here's a portrait of my brother just to end the roll off with. So, roll 86. This was my second time shooting Delta 3200 and I decided to shoot this roll at a protest that was happening. I didn't get many good shots from this roll in my opinion. I think just the combination of the atmosphere, trying not to capture people's faces too directly, and also shooting such a high ISO in broad daylight just led to the results being not very good. Personally, I do like my black and white work to have a bit more contrast, and like I said before, shooting 3200 in broad daylight led to some pretty suboptimal, grainy and flat images as a result of that. The rest of this roll wasn't really anything special either. I do like these two photos from the window from my room. It has a little bit more of that contrast I was speaking about earlier, and I think the black and white adds a little bit of almost mystery to the image, which is nice too. So for this roll, it was my first time shooting a disposable since all the way back in roll 2, and I was actually quite pleasantly surprised with the results. The whole purpose of shooting this disposable was to kind of almost take things back to the very start of my photography journey and just remind myself how relaxing and uncomplicated photography can be. I shot this on a family trip to the Lake District alongside my brother, who was also shooting a disposable, as part of a YouTube video where we'd compare the two. I was quite surprised by how much I liked the images when I got them back from the disposable. I didn't think they'd maybe necessarily the most sharp or the cleanest images ever, but they were just fun and good representations of the time, which is all you can really ask for out of a disposable, I suppose. As well, since I shot so much in a nature setting, the green from what I believe is the Fuji stock just came out really nice, and the colours came out really lush, and yeah, I'd totally be down to shoot more disposables in the future. I think it's quite refreshing, almost, I guess is maybe the word, to just strip things back and just relax with photography. In terms of speaking of how stripped back the cameras were, I did have to get a little bit creative with my lighting, especially in shots like these, but that was also the fun of it, was trying to overcome those obstacles. I'd totally go back to using a disposable in the future. There's one particular negative feedback video I've always been inspired by, where a group of photographers all took a trip out to somewhere and each shot a varyingly different disposable camera, and the results are really cool. So that's something I'd like to recreate in the future, I think. On a trip to a charity shop, I ended up picking up a little film camera with these cool pop-up panoramic borders. Since it was only a tenner, I decided why not buy it, put a roll through it, and the photos are pretty fun. I started off the roll by taking some of the pictures at that atelier event I mentioned back in roll 85, and then I also took some fun portraits of my brother when he came to stay. Myself and Connor then took a walk out to Grindleford to see if there was any cool pictures to be taken in nature, and there was. Unfortunately, the camera misfocused a couple times on this day, which was a little bit disappointing, but for the most part, it did a pretty good job, and the lens was fairly sharp, to say it was only £10 as well. The panoramic feature is definitely a bit gimmicky. All it is when you flip it up is just tiny little borders appear on the film frame. But it's kind of fun, and it's a little bit more fun to compose with and to just kind of switch it up. In particular, I'm a really big fan of this photo. This is sort of really nice backlit image of a gap in the trees where you can see really far behind, and it just came out really nice. Although I do wish that the greens would have been slightly more like vibrant, I guess, in the background, but overall I'm still happy with it. And the other photo that I like from this roll is this photo of Maya's dogs. I love the composition of both of them in the scene, and the mix of like foreground and background elements I think is really nice. I always love taking close-up pictures of the dogs. It reminds me of Dido Moriyama's work, who's a photographer I really love, and you're about to see me get even more similar to him. This roll I'm really happy with. Even from the second shot, I knew I was onto something quite special with this beautiful wide open shot of a man walking his dog in the park. I just love the amount of like space in this image, and the differing levels of focus really add to sort of just a really nice moody atmosphere. Maya and I ended up going on another walk, and I got a couple more nice pictures along the way. Before I started to take more pictures of the dogs again. And I really love this second image of the dogs leaping for the stick. I think it just came out really great. I love the use of flash, I love the contrast, I love the like strange, almost liminal space they seem to be in with the disembodied hand and just the two dogs. All the elements work together to make a really nice image, and I'm really happy with it. I then ended up going on a shoot with Henry, where I was primarily using the RB67 as my primary camera, but I had the G1 with this roll in as a secondary, so I was kind of taking some pictures with that, which I quite like. And then I went on a shoot with my friend Michael, and I was kind of primarily using the RB67 as my primary camera, but I was shooting this roll in the G1, and the photos I quite like. Speaking of medium format rolls, if you've been enjoying this video, please drop a comment, a like or a subscribe, because potentially there could be a medium format version of this coming, if people enjoy this one of course. So let me know if you're enjoying it. It's taken almost a year to make, and any support would be very much appreciated. So yeah, if you want a medium format 50 rolls video, drop a comment, a like, or even subscribe, if that's something you'd like to see in the future. The rest of this roll was shot with my friend Harry as we did a sort of Halloween inspired shoot for the day, but we'll cover more of that in a second. Oh, and here's one he shot of me. It is too cold. It is too cold. Okay, so like I said before, me and Harry were meeting up to do sort of a Halloween-inspired spooky kind of shoot, as I was interested in sort of sharpening my portraiture skills and also just taking the contacts out for a little bit. We started off shooting these images in the basement where he'd sort of light a match and then I'd quickly try and catch it with the flash. And to be fair, these didn't come out too badly. I was quite surprised that the light from the match even came out, obviously shooting that frontal flash onto it, but it came out alright in the end. I particularly like these ones where he's wearing the gas mask, as that just kind of adds to the spooky element that we were trying to go for. After that, we headed out into the park to take some photos out in sort of the wilderness, and I really like these ones where he's sort of through the clearing of the trees, sort of just stood there. Just quite nice. However, I think the images reached a peak when we got to the graveyard, as these images where he's sort of covering his face came out really nicely, and even these ones where his hand is on the grave, just quite nice and sort of ambiguous, just ended up coming out really cool. Remember back in roll 82 when I was in Malta? Well, this roll caught the last couple frames of that and did quite a good job at it too. The 100 speed ended up being the right choice for what film stock to bring there, just because it was so sunny every day and there was quite a lot of light in every image, so it was nice to have that 100 speed. And the rest of this point and shoot roll just ended up as snapshots of days where I'd taken it out and shot with other rolls and taken the point and shoot with me. So we've got a couple shots of George, a couple from the walk with Connor, one from the Lake District trip, a couple from when Cruz played at the lead mill, and then a couple from a walk with Maya in the botanicals. It was once again time to photograph the Italian fiasco as they played the Washington again, and I'm happy to say that this roll came out a lot better than the other ones. I do think the compositions here are a little bit more definitive than before. They have a lot more intentionality behind them, which I think is really showing in that growth as well. And yeah, just generally quite nice images. There's some closer up ones, there's some wider ones. And I'd also just learned how to use flash and expose properly with that, so that was nice too. I also like the more restrained use of slow shutter speed here. I think because it's not on every shot of the roll, it's actually ended up coming out quite nice and almost like a nice change to occasionally have some of those images. And I think it just does well to capture like the motion and feeling of the show. Okay, so it's time again for some more images from the Lomography Fisheye 2. Since there's a pretty low ceiling on the times of like quality of images that you can get from this camera, I decided to just load it and then leave it in my house and occasionally take pictures when my friends were around, or on shoot days when I'd have space in my bag, I'd bring it and take a couple portraits here and there, just as little BTS moments on the side. And I think, once again, I'm just really impressed. The images are so fun to make and to look at. The fisheye is just really great at making fun images, and they're so light-hearted. And obviously, yeah, in terms of quality composition, they're not the greatest, but they're just silly photos and can occasionally be used in quite creative ways, which I like too. I should probably get back into using it. It's currently not got a film loaded in at the minute, but I think I might load it back up after this video and just leave it for another 6 months and see what kind of fun images we can make. Even on this roll, I still haven't figured out how to get the best results out of the G1, not even how to get that proper sharp focus. I ended up taking this out on quite a few walks with Maya, and it was still struggling to find focus, which was a little disappointing. But there was the occasional image which came out looking great, like this one of the trees above us came out really nice. Annoyingly though, for all the missed focus that I had, this photo that Louis took of me and Alex came out really sharp and in focus. So shout out to Louis for that. For this roll, we're going back to my point and shoot, and we're going to load in some expired film that my friend Harry gave me. I don't normally shoot expired film. I find the sort of general gambling of the results and sort of the strange colour casts a bit too distracting and not really the results I'm looking for in my own work. But this roll surprised me. This roll has this kind of pretty intense reddish pink colour cast to the entire thing, which rendered the skin tones to be a little bit more of like a freshly sunburnt look than what I'm used to, but still pretty fun. Other than that, I guess the fun part was not really knowing exactly what your results are going to come out looking like, and that sort of mystery as to what you're going to get. That was pretty fun. Not really knowing what to expect. I do really like this image from the front of a building with this huge imposing sign in the forefront of the frame that just sort of dominates the entire composition. But really my favourite photo from this roll is probably this image of Maya. Like I said before, that red colour cast just made a red t-shirt really pop, and then by some stroke of luck there was also a light leak on this film, but it resulted in this huge sort of red artifact coming at the top of the frame, and it just seems to work so well and complements the red t-shirt so much that it almost looks intentional, but I guess it was more of just a happy accident. Although, like I did say, I was a fan of the results in the end. I don't think I'm in any particular rush to shoot expired film anytime soon. But I guess the opportunity is always there if you're wanting something a little bit different, a little bit something maybe like zanier, and it can be fun at times, like when we shot it on medium format. Maybe there'll be a video on that, who knows. But yeah, maybe not many more expired film for the near future. Okay, so I finally got some more Potsdam 100 in my film fridge, and I decided to take it out with Maya to see if we could take some pictures of her with the birds and the squirrels in the park. Admittedly, it was a little bit of trial and error to get started, but after a while, I ended up finding the groove and getting some fairly decent shots out of it. Unfortunately though, it was very difficult to capture such quick moving birds on such a slow film. However, I do like this photo of Maya with the really shallow depth of field because you got that lovely bokeh effect going on in the background. I ended up taking 2 more images on this walk, both of which have that nice sort of soft focus effect, and they came out fairly nice, which is nice. And then got a couple nice flash images from when it started snowing, I think that night. As much as I'd like to shoot more Potsdam 100, it's just not stocked locally anywhere near me, which is a huge disservice because it is one of my favourite stocks. I'd like to shoot a lot more, so hopefully the local film lab stocks it sometime soon. For all 97, I was shooting my friend Jenna's gig at factory floor, and unfortunately this one didn't go to plan. I'm still a fan of the results though, don't get me wrong, but we definitely made some mistakes on this roll. Before the gig, I took some portraits of Jenna, or at least that was the plan, if I didn't leave my camera in the flash mode, even when I was not shooting flash, which resulted in a couple misses. Certainly not the best start to the roll, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't sort of knock me off course and my confidence for the rest of that roll. And then once you started playing, I did start shooting a lot more. However, there just wasn't really enough light to shoot at anything higher than like 15th or 30th. So there's a lot of motion blur and a lot of like softness to these images. Like I said before though, I do like these images, but unfortunately there's just not that sharpness to them. I could have definitely done with pushing the HP5 up to 800, and that would have given me a lot more room. But I kind of like the soft ambience that these images have. It just would have been nice to capture some sharp ones as well. I think my favourite from this roll is probably this shot from up on the balcony at a slightly higher angle with just Jen and Omar tucked away in the very corner of the frame, with the mirror ball and the light sort of speckling the rest of the frame. My second favourite, however, was after the gig. I explained what happened before to Jenna and she had time to take some more, which was great. So we went back into that little side room and took some more portraits. The light in the room was this sort of lovely orange ambient light, which was unfortunate since I was shooting black and white, but rumour has it that there may be a colour shot of this on the next roll. I couldn't possibly say though. Anyway, as I was saying, my second favourite from this roll is this shot of Jenna where the ambient lighting is sort of lighting only half of her face and creates this really nice sort of soft contrast and sort of moody atmosphere to the image, which I really like. Okay, so this was an overall through the point and shoot, and this one caught quite a lot. Like I was saying before, this is what the lighting looked like at factory floor that night, and I also managed to capture a couple more from Jen's gig. I also ended up taking my camera to the final 140 birthday party, And I really like these images. They've got a lot of sentimental value from what was just a really fun and really special night. So those are really like meaningful to look back on. And as for the rest of the shots, I kind of just went home for Christmas, so there's a lot of sort of just like B-roll kind of shots from there. Okay, so roll 99, and it's another one from the point and shoot, but this one contains some very sad images as they're from the day that I cut off my first rat tail. A very sad day, I'm sure we can all agree, but much like a hydra, but not nearly as good. If you cut one off, two will grow back in its place. So thank God the worst haircut known to man is still thriving. Other than that, this roll just had a lot of sort of like fun winter snapshots with like friends. Just a really nice roll to look back on. I do always say this, and I probably said it 100 times already in this video alone, but I'm always surprised by how consistently good the sure shot can be. I feel like sometimes I have reservations about picking it up and using it just because I'm like, oh, it's just a point and shoot. But then it always surprises me with how crisp some of the images can be. However, one photo really stood out to me from this roll, and at first it was a pretty seemingly innocuous one. It's literally just this image from the front of my house. But there's just something so nice about sort of the texture of the snow, the shadows from the railing, and sort of the nice mix of foreground and background elements. I really don't know why, but it's just one that stands so strong above the rest. Okay, so roll 100. I started this roll by taking a walk into the botanical gardens, and I took these two images of the trees with sort of the sun shining through. And I really like this like little detail of the bird just in the corner of the frame as sort of the subject. I also took quite a nice portrait of Maya here too. Once again, even after 100 rolls, I'm still a massive fan of those Kodak gold tones. And then the day after that, you'll never guess, but we ended up going for a walk, and on this particular walk I was just mainly taking pictures of these strange stick structures that were all in the woods, so any that we passed there I'd take an image of. As for the rest of this roll, I ended up taking a trip up to Manchester to see and shoot my friend Ralph, but we were intending on shooting some Ilford SFX as part of Film February, so I was using the rest of this roll as sort of a warm-up. So we ended up shooting most of this roll pretty early in the day. I do really like this image as we're leaving Ralph's flat of him in the elevator just as the doors are closing. I like this later shot as well of the flowers sort of in motion, and then also this other one that we did with the umbrella and the flowers, but with sort of an inverse posing, which was quite fun. I do wish I caught a couple more images of this sort of setup. I really enjoyed the posing, I think it's really fun, but my composition with it isn't very good, so we definitely could have improved on that, I think. And as for a final shot, I really like this image of him holding up the flowers whilst I'm slightly higher up, and the nice shallow depth I feel really heightens them as a subject. So 100 rolls, we did it. That's about 3,600 images, about 4 years of my life. This script alone was 31 pages, and this video has taken a year to make, if you couldn't tell by both the changing of the seasons and my haircuts. I never envisioned that it would take me anywhere near as long to finish this video. If you couldn't tell from my prediction from the end of part 1 when that was released, I was a little bit off by like 6 months or so, but it's been a really nice experience to look back on my earlier work and to sort of critique but also appreciate it at the same time. It's been really nice to see sort of the progression and the growth, and it obviously certainly isn't an overnight thing, but I've enjoyed basically the whole journey, even the little mistakes and mishaps along the way. Another thing that I think when looking back at it as a whole is quite interesting is to see the different types of photography that I was into at certain times throughout like my journey or career, and to see how that's developed and changed into my photographic style. Like for instance, that 2-month long period where I was just shooting cars all day. Maybe I don't shoot cars anymore, but is there something that I learned from that and took into the kind of photography that I do today? Whilst being a really great rounded number, 100 rolls is also quite useful because essentially from 100 rolls onwards, I've made a video about every single roll, so those are all available to view on my channel already, whereas the first 100 rolls and that progression in growth is now available to view through this video. But I've really enjoyed looking back through my earlier work and also putting it out for people to see, and to see sort of a more realistic and slower paced growth and progression. Now I'm on something like 150 rolls, and those last 50 rolls and the last year of photographic work has been the best so far, and I'm so happy with where I am and the work that I'm producing, and I'm so happy that I'm producing work that I consistently enjoy as well. It's a really great feeling, and this has all been the build up and culmination to this where I'm at now. Once again, if you've enjoyed this video but you'd like to see a medium format version, please sound off in the comments and let me know, because I would love to make that. In terms of a favourite image from these 100 rolls, I couldn't even begin to tell you. There's simply way too many that I really enjoy. Maybe the best photo I'll ever take is in roll 101, maybe 201, maybe roll 1000, but I'm really enjoying the process of getting to that favourite image. So I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video and seeing the first 100 rolls in 4 years of my photographic journey. Thank you very much for watching and supporting. If you've enjoyed this video, drop it a like, let me know which was your favourite roll in the comments below, and if you'd like to see more of my photography and maybe the next 200 rolls I do, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching.